ever wondered what happens when those who humiliate others discover their victim is connected to someone powerful? Shen Nanchu experiences this reality as she faces the ultimate public humiliation, trembling with hidden rage while forced to her knees by a manager completely unaware of her true identity. In the next few minutes, you'll witness how a single moment of cruelty leads to an extraordinary chain of events that transforms a scorned woman into someone whose strength commands respect. Stay with me to see the dramatic moment when the CEO walks in and the atmosphere in the room instantly freezes. In the hushed atmosphere of Liang Enterprises' executive floor, Shen Nanchu knelt on the cold marble, her knees pressed uncomfortably against the hard surface. The pristine office, with its minimalist decor and floor-to-ceiling glass walls, had transformed into an arena of public spectacle. Manager Gio loomed over her, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across her bowed head as he berated her with calculated precision. His voice, initially controlled and cutting, had risen steadily over the past 10 minutes. "Do you think this company achieved its status by employing people who can't follow simple instructions?" he demanded, the veins in his neck protruding with each syllable. "The Tao Group contract was worth millions, and your carelessness nearly cost us everything." The accusation hung in the air, a distortion of what had truly happened. Shen Nanchu had warned him about the inconsistencies in the proposal 3 days prior, but he had dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. Now, with the client threatening to back out, he needed a scapegoat. Her stomach tightened at the memory of her ignored warnings. Through the glass walls, employees from neighboring departments pretended not to stare while absorbing every detail of her humiliation. Some averted their eyes, discomfort evident in their hurried steps. Others lingered, watching with poorly disguised interest, perhaps relieved they weren't in her position, or secretly pleased to see the quiet, competent Shen Nanchu brought low. Manager Gio had chosen this location deliberately, knowing the transparency would amplify his disciplinary action. Each accusation he hurled reverberated against the glass, ensuring that even those pretending not to listen could hear every detail. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you," Manager Gio demanded, but Shen Nanchu kept her eyes fixed on a small scuff mark on the floor. Humiliation burned through her chest and throat, threatening to manifest as tears she refused to shed. Years of enduring hardship had taught her to compartmentalize such feelings. She separated herself from this moment, calculating her next move. "Perhaps we made a mistake, hiring someone from your background," Manager Zhou continued, his voice dropping to a more insidious tone as he circled her kneeling form. "Do you know how many graduates from prestigious universities applied for your position? People with the right connections, the right upbringing, to understand how things work at this level." A subtle murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. Everyone knew Shen Nanchu hadn't attended an elite university. Her education had been pieced together through scholarships and night classes while working multiple jobs. It was this determination that had impressed the HR director enough to hire her, despite Manager Zhou's initial objections. Her jaw clenched imperceptibly, the only outward sign of the pride she felt in her hard-won achievements. "This isn't some provincial company where standards can be compromised," he continued, targeting her humble origins. "Liang Enterprise represents excellence in every aspect. When clients entrust their business to us, they expect perfection from everyone they encounter, even someone as unremarkable as you." The power dynamic was painfully apparent. Manager Zhou stood, impeccably dressed in his tailored suit, wielding his authority like a weapon. By contrast, Shen Nanchu appeared defenseless, in her simple navy dress and low heels, suddenly seeming inappropriate in the luxury surroundings. Yet something about her stillness suggested more than mere submission. While her body complied with the humiliating demand, there was a quality to her silence that felt deliberate rather than defeated. Her breathing remained measured, her shoulders squared despite their slight downward curve. The hands resting on her thighs neither trembled nor clenched, but remained relaxed. "What I don't understand," Manager Joe said, leaning down to bring his face closer to hers, "is the audacity. How someone like you thought you could succeed here. Did you imagine your diligence would compensate for your limitations?" Several employees exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even in a competitive corporate environment, this personal attack crossed professional boundaries. Yet no one intervened. The cool air of the office seemed to press against her skin, each breath carrying the faint scent of Manager Gio's expensive cologne, a sensory reminder of the wealth and privilege that separated them. Throughout his tirade, Shen Nanchu's expression remained unreadable. What most failed to notice was the slight change in her breathing pattern when Manager Joe mentioned the Tao group, a barely perceptible hitch that might have revealed something important to a more observant tormentor. Her composed exterior masked a mind working rapidly, processing each accusation against the reality she knew. "Perhaps this experience will teach you to know your place," Manager Gio said, his voice now carrying the false generosity of someone who believes they're delivering an important life lesson. A faint reflection in the glass caught Shen Nanchu's attention, beyond the spectators, through the windows overlooking the corporate plaza below. A sleek black car had pulled up to the building's main entrance. Recognition flickered in her eyes before her gaze returned to the floor. The car's arrival coincided with a subtle shift in her demeanor. Though still kneeling, her posture straightened. Her breathing became even more measured, as if preparing for something only she could anticipate. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Manager Gio finally demanded. For the first time since being forced to her knees, Shen Nanchu raised her eyes to meet his. The absolute calm in her gaze momentarily unsettled him. There was neither fear nor desperation in her expression, only a composed assessment that felt strangely like she was the one in control. "No, Manager Gio," she replied, her voice quiet but perfectly steady. "I have nothing to say." Her response seemed to infuriate him further. "Then perhaps you should remain silent more often," he snapped. "Get up and return to your desk. I expect the revised proposal by 5, and if there's a single error, you can clear out your belongings tonight." Yet Shen Nanchu made no immediate move to rise, her eyes now focused beyond the glass walls. Several onlookers followed her gaze, noticing security personnel moving with unusual purpose through the lobby below. The elevator indicator light began its ascent toward the executive floor. While everyone's attention shifted to the ascending elevator, Manager Joe seized the opportunity to transform his public criticism into something far more damaging. His voice lowered to a conspiratorial tone that made everyone lean forward slightly. "Before we move on, you should all understand exactly what kind of person has been working among you," he announced, his words hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. "This is about a pattern of behavior." The gathered employees exchanged uncertain glances as Manager Zhu began methodically constructing a narrative about Shen Nanchu that bore little resemblance to reality. With each accusation, the line between truth and fiction blurred, until even those who had directly witnessed Shen's actual conduct began questioning their own memory. "Shen has demonstrated concerning behavior since joining our team," Manager Gio continued, scanning the crowd to ensure he maintained their attention. "Her work ethic is questionable at best. Several clients have complained about her unprofessional conduct during meetings." His words seeped through the gathering like poison, infecting the atmosphere with suspicion. Two accounting clerks in the back exchanged knowing looks, though neither had ever actually interacted with Shen in a client setting. In this toxic environment, perception quickly crystallized into accepted fact. "I've received reports that Ms. Shen frequently disappears during working hours," he continued, cleverly avoiding specifying who had made these reports. "And when confronted about these absences, she offers vague excuses that cannot be verified." What Manager Gio deliberately omitted was that Shen's disappearances were actually her taking lunch at her desk while continuing to work. hidden from view in the small conference room where she often stayed late. Just last month, she had single-handedly rescued the Meridian project after 3 team members quit unexpectedly, working through weekends to meet the deadline. Her vague excuses were her polite refusals to join after-work drinking sessions, preferring instead to continue refining presentations and proposals. As suspicion permeated the room, whispers erupted across departments. "I heard she tries to get special treatment from the male executives," one woman murmured, though she had no evidence for this claim. Always staying late when certain directors are working, this fabrication gained momentum, transforming Shen into an opportunist, using inappropriate means to advance her career. A complete contrast to the woman who had recently stayed until midnight, helping the marketing team finish their quarterly presentation, refusing any credit for her assistance. Manager Joe observed the spreading rumors with calculated satisfaction. Each whisper further cemented his position, while deflecting attention from his own critical errors with the Tao Group proposal. This demolition of Shen's reputation created a perfect scapegoat, while reinforcing his authority. "I've been too lenient," he continued, his voice hardening with contempt. "Perhaps it's my fault for not addressing these issues sooner, but when someone from Ms. Shen's background is given an opportunity in a prestigious company like ours, one expects gratitude expressed through exemplary work, not this level of disregard for professional standards." The reference to Shen's background triggered an immediate response. Those from similar humble origins shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of their own vulnerability, while others unconsciously straightened their designer clothes, creating physical distance between themselves and the kneeling woman. This socio-economic bias played directly into Manager Joe's strategy. By invoking Shen's background, he had effectively labeled her as an outsider, someone who, fundamentally, didn't belong despite her qualifications. Through the glass walls, other employees slowed their pace, drawn to the spectacle. Within minutes, versions of what was happening spread throughout 3 floors of the building. Throughout this character assassination, Shang Yanchu remained kneeling, her gaze fixed on a point in the distance. The security personnel were now joined by others, their movements betraying an unusual sense of urgency. Finally, as Manager Gio paused, Shen spoke. Her voice was quiet but remarkably steady. "With respect, Manager Gio, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about several of these incidents. If I could explain..." Manager Joe's face darkened. "Explain?" he interrupted sharply. "The facts speak for themselves, Ms. Shen. Your performance reviews, client feedback, and observed conduct form a clear pattern that doesn't require your creative interpretation." He stepped closer, towering over her. "This isn't a discussion. This is a necessary correction of behavior that has been tolerated far too long." The power imbalance was stark, a manager standing tall, using his position to silence an employee who wasn't even permitted to rise. Those watching recognized the fundamental injustice, yet remained silent, unwilling to risk becoming the next target. "Now," Manager Joe continued, "since you're so eager to prove your value, I have an immediate task for you. The CEO is arriving for an unexpected inspection. He'll be joining us for lunch, and you'll be responsible for ordering and collecting the seafood platter from Golden Harbor Restaurant." Concern crossed Shen's face. "Manager Gio, if you're referring to Mr. Huo, I believe he has a severe shellfish allergy. Perhaps we should..." "Are you presuming to know the CEO's preferences better than I do?" Manager Gio cut her off. "Mr. Huo specifically requested their signature seafood selection. This is exactly the kind of overstepping that has become problematic in your work." Several employees exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing the potential disaster. "You have 30 minutes. Manager Zhu instructed, holding out his company card. "Don't disappoint me again." As Shen rose to her feet, accepting the card with a slight bow, the elevator doors chimed softly. At the security desk, the head of security ended a call, immediately dispatching additional officers toward the executive floor. The carefully controlled environment that Manager Joe had cultivated was about to face an unexpected disruption. The security team's sudden mobilization wasn't random. It signaled preparation for an arrival that would transform the office drama into something far more consequential. As Manager Joe savored what he believed to be his moment of triumph, he remained oblivious to subtle yet crucial details. The glimpse of an expensive platinum watch beneath Shen's screen when she reached for his card, the knowing glances exchanged between security personnel, and most significantly, the message that briefly illuminated her phone screen before she discreetly tucked it away. "I'm almost there. Hold on. Make sure you don't embarrass us when greeting Mr. Ho," Manager Gio continued, his voice laced with condescension as he straightened his tie. "He's notorious for being difficult. If you mess this up, I'll make sure everyone knows it was your incompetence, not mine." What Manager Cho couldn't see was the quiet calculation behind Shen's composed exterior. Her fingers instinctively touched the small platinum pendant hidden beneath her collar, the exact match to one worn by Huo Xian himself, a gift exchanged during a moment far removed from this corporate battlefield. "I understand the importance of this meeting," Shen replied, her voice steady despite everything. The memory of last night surfaced unbidden, sitting across from Hua in his private study, both of them laughing as she recounted the day's events, neither imagining how quickly the situation would deteriorate. "Do you really think you understand anything at this level?" Manager Gio scoffed, gesturing broadly to the executive floor. "I've spent years cultivating my relationship with CEO Hio. We understand each other as equals in business. Someone like you could never grasp the complexities of these professional relationships." The irony hung in the air, tangible to Shen alone. Behind her placid expression, a memory played out. Shen sitting beside her hospital bed 3 years ago, his normally commanding presence softened by concern as he held her hand through the night. The same man, who supposedly shared a connection with Manager Joe, had whispered promises of protection while she slept, believing herself entirely alone in the world. As Shen rose to her feet, a subtle shift occurred throughout the office. Like distant thunder before a storm, the security team's communications grew more frequent, their movements more purposeful. The head of security himself now stood at attention near the elevator bank, adjusting his earpiece while discreetly directing his team to specific positions. These weren't routine security measures. They were preparations reserved for only one person. "I'll collect the seafood order immediately," Shen said, conscious of the eyes upon her. She made no move to correct Manager Cho about the CEO's allergy, a piece of information she possessed from intimate knowledge of the man himself. Her silence was born of a promise made in private, to allow Huo to handle his own business affairs without interference. Manager Gio nodded dismissively before turning to address the gathering of employees. "This is what happens when we lower our standards for hiring," he announced, gesturing toward Shen's retreating form. "Some people simply don't have what it takes to succeed in this environment." What he failed to notice was how several security personnel tracked Shen's movement with respectful nods, a subtle acknowledgement completely at odds with her apparent status. One even stepped forward to discreetly murmur, "Mr. Huo will be here within minutes, ma'am. Would you prefer we delay his arrival?" Shen whispered. "Let things unfold as they should." Her mind drifted to 6 months earlier, when she'd first agreed to Hua's suggestion that she work within his company incognito. "I need someone I can trust completely," he had explained, his fingers tracing patterns against her palm as they sat in his garden at dawn. "Someone who can observe without being observed, who can tell me the truth about how my company operates when I'm not present," she had agreed, not realizing the personal cost would include moments like this. Throughout the office, the atmosphere transformed like air before a lightning strike. Employees who moments ago had eagerly participated in Shen's humiliation now straightened papers and adjusted their appearances. The administrative director emerged from her office, looking uncharacteristically alert, Even the office lighting seemed to intensify, as if the building itself were bracing for impact. Manager Joe remained blissfully unaware, still lecturing about professional standards and his close relationship with leadership. CEO Huo consults me directly on matters of importance, he boasted, straightening his already impeccable suit. He values my insights precisely because I maintain standards like these. In the midst of his self-aggrandizement, Shen's phone illuminated with another message. This time, she didn't hide the screen quickly enough, and a junior associate glimpsed the sender's name. The young woman's eyes widened in confusion, her gaze darting between Shen and Manager Joe, with growing uncertainty. Manager Gio caught the exchange and frowned. "Is there something more important than your job responsibilities?" he demanded, extending his hand expectantly. "It's personal," Shen replied, maintaining her composure. "Nothing is personal during work hours," he countered, his palm still outstretched, handed over. For the first time since her public dressing down began, Shen hesitated. The phone contained evidence of a life together that neither she nor Huo were ready to make public. Before she could decide how to respond, the elevator chimed, and the atmosphere in the office crystallized into perfect stillness. The head of security touched his earpiece once more, then nodded to his team. With military precision, they aligned themselves along the corridor, a formation reserved exclusively for the company's highest authority. Manager Zhou, finally sensing the shift, turned toward the elevator doors with a practiced smile already forming, the expression he reserved for those above him in the corporate hierarchy. As the doors slid open, Shen felt a wave of complex emotions. Despite everything, she had wanted to protect Hua from seeing this side of his company. But watching Manager Joe transform instantly from tyrant to sycophant reminded her why Hua had insisted on this arrangement in the first place. In the seconds before Hyo Xian would become visible to the office, Shen allowed herself one unguarded moment. Her expression softened as she recalled his words that morning. "I worry about you there, facing everything alone." The truth they were about to uncover about Manager Gio's leadership was necessary, regardless of personal cost. The elevator doors parted like the veil between two worlds, one where Shen Nanshu knelt in humiliation, and another where justice awaited. The figure who stepped into the office wasn't merely a man in an expensive suit. His presence altered the molecular structure of the air itself. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously as CEO Hyo Xian's polished shoes touched the carpet, each step purposeful and measured. Unlike the chaotic energy that Manager Joe had unleashed throughout the office, Chio's power manifested in stillness, a controlled storm that everyone except one man could sense approaching. A subtle shift in the air pressure preceded the elevator's arrival. Employees near the entrance straightened imperceptibly, sensing something before conscious awareness took hold. Manager Joe's voice continued to fill the space, his finger still pointing accusingly at Shen, and furthermore, this kind of incompetence reflects poorly on all of us. When I think about how his words hung suspended as the first employee noticed the CEO's arrival, their sharp intake of breath creating a ripple effect across the room. Shoulders straightened, hands smoothed down wrinkles in clothing, eyes widened in recognition, all except Manager Gio, who remained tragically oblivious to the shift. The spectators had transformed from audience to witnesses. The performance they had been watching, Shen's public humiliation, was about to become a different show entirely. Qianqian moved through the office with the quiet confidence of someone who owned the building and the air within it. His tailored charcoal suit contrasted with the simple navy dress Shen wore as she remained kneeling. Why would the CEO himself appear unannounced? And why did his gaze immediately fix upon the kneeling woman with such intensity? The controlled fury in Hua's expression was detectable only in the smallest details. A slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible clench of his jaw. To the casual observer, he appeared merely focused, but to those who had spent years studying the micro-expressions of leadership, the signs were unmistakable. Someone had crossed an invisible line. I've spoken with Mr. Huo many times about maintaining standards, Manager Gio continued, unaware that the very man he invoked stood 15 feet away, moving closer with each passing second. He expects. The sudden silence from colleagues finally registered. Manager Zhou paused mid-sentence, his instincts alerting him that something had changed. The atmosphere had crystallized into something unrecognizable. Fear mixed with confusion as they watched Huo's eyes fix, not on Manager Zhou's extended hand, but on the kneeling woman. Manager Zhou turned slowly, the color draining from his face, as he found himself face to face with the man he had been claiming to know so intimately. Mr. Hua, what an unexpected pleasure. I was just addressing a serious performance issue with walked directly past Manager Gio, as if the man were invisible. Approaching Shen with purposeful strides, the office collectively held its breath. No one moved. The soft hum of the ventilation system became deafening in the silence. As Huo reached Shen, he paused, looking down at her with an expression that confused everyone watching. It wasn't the dispassionate gaze of an executive viewing an underperforming employee. It was something entirely different, something that made no sense within the context the office had constructed around Shen Nanqiu. Hua extended his hand toward her, not in greeting, but in an offer of assistance. The gesture was startling in its tenderness. Fingers that signed multi-million-dollar contracts now reached out to a woman the office had collectively dismissed. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of absolute authority. The words weren't shouted, yet they echoed off the glass walls more powerfully than Manager Jeeves' previous tirade. Shen looked up, meeting Cho's eyes directly. Something unspoken passed between them, a private language developed through experiences no one else had witnessed. She placed her hand in his, and he helped her to her feet with surprising gentleness. Manager Gio's face contorted through expressions, confusion, disbelief, and finally, sickening realization. "Sir, I can explain. This employee has been—" I said, "That's enough." Hua's words sliced through the attempted explanation. His attention remained fixed on Shen as he asked, "Are you all right?" The question, posed with unexpected familiarity, sent tremors of confusion through the watching employees. There was no formal address, no proper hierarchical distance. Instead, there was concern, genuine and unmasked. Shen nodded once, her composure intact despite the ordeal. "I'm fine," she answered, her quiet dignity throwing Manager Chow's behavior into sharper relief. Only after receiving her assurance did Huo turn to face Manager Zhou, whose authoritative posture had crumbled. The manager took an involuntary step backward. "Mr. Gio," Hua began, using the formal address that highlighted its absence when speaking to Shen. "Perhaps you could explain why one of our most valuable team members is on her knees in the middle of the office." The word "valuable" forced a collective reassessment of Shen Nanqiu. If the CEO considered her valuable, what did that say about their assessments? What about Manager Zhou's judgment? There was an issue with the Dow Group's submission, Manager Gio stammered. Miss Shen failed to— "Kneel," Wu interrupted, his voice suddenly granite. "Excuse me, sir. If kneeling is an appropriate response to a professional disagreement in this company, demonstrate it for me," Kuo said. "Show everyone how it's done." The office became so silent that an arriving email sounded like an explosion. Manager Gio's mouth opened and closed without sound. "That's what I thought," Jiahua Cheng said. He turned back to Shen and placed his hand lightly on her shoulder. The touch was brief, but unmistakably familiar. "We have matters to discuss," he said to her, before addressing the room. "Everyone back to work. Mr. Zhou, my office. 15 minutes. As Huo guided Shen toward his private office, employees scattered to their desks. Manager Jiaoho remained frozen, his expression suggesting he was mentally calculating the cost of his actions and finding the sum catastrophic. What happens when the person you've humiliated turns out to be irreplaceable to the most powerful man in the company? As Huan knelt beside Shen Nanqian, the whispers that had filled the office moments before evaporated into a stunned silence. The CEO's hand rested gently on her shoulder, his eyes scanning her face with unmistakable concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and intimate, meant only for her, despite the dozens of witnesses. The tenderness in his tone carried none of the corporate formality expected between a CEO and an ordinary employee. It was the voice of someone who had asked this question before, in private moments, unknown to anyone in this office. Shen nodded slightly, her composure unbroken, even in vindication. Whatever passed between them in that moment remained unspoken, a silent language of shared understanding that left everyone watching with a growing sense of confusion. The dynamic that had seemed so clear minutes ago, manager disciplining subordinate, was rapidly disintegrating into something far more complex. Manager Zhou stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mr. Huo, I can explain. There were serious issues." Huo didn't even turn his head. His attention remained fixed solely on Shen, as if Zhou's voice were nothing more than background noise, unworthy of acknowledgement. The dismissal was more devastating than any verbal rebuke could have been, rendering Zhou's authority utterly meaningless with a simple act of indifference. Around the office, expressions transformed in waves, first shock, then confusion, and finally dawning comprehension. A marketing coordinator near the water cooler dropped her pen, her mouth forming a perfect O. Two account managers exchanged wide-eyed glances, their earlier snickers at Shen's situation now frozen in embarrassment. Employees who had watched Shen's humiliation with secret satisfaction now shifted uncomfortably, reassessing everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman. One young intern whispered to her colleague, "Who is she really?" The question rippled through the gathering, each person suddenly recalibrating their mental hierarchy. Some glanced down at their phones, wondering if they had missed some company-wide announcement about Shen's importance. Shen stood beside Hual now, her posture straight but unpretentious. There was no triumph in her expression, no haughty glance toward those who had judged her. Her quiet dignity seemed only amplified by vindication, not transformed by it. This was perhaps the most unnerving aspect for those watching, the realization that the woman they had dismissed as weak had possessed this strength of character all along. Only when Shen was steadily on her feet did Huo finally turn his attention to Manager Zhou. The shift in his demeanor was immediate and chilling. The gentle concern that had softened his features hardened into something cold and unwavering. Zhou physically recoiled, taking an involuntary step backward. "You made her kneel," Huo stated, each word precisely measured. It wasn't a question, but a confirmation of fact, delivered with such controlled fury that several employees found themselves backing away, despite not being the target. Zhou's mouth opened and closed several times, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Sir, I was following protocol for serious disciplinary matters. The documentation she provided for the Dao project was inconsistent, and her explanation, Hua interrupted, was that you ignored her warnings about the client's updated manufacturing timeline, dismissed her suggestions for the revised materials sourcing, and then attempted to shift blame when those exact issues threatened the contract." His knowledge betrayed an intimacy with Shen's work that went far beyond casual awareness. The murmurs among the staff grew louder. A veteran account executive whispered to her assistant, visibly pale. The department secretary frantically scrolled through emails, searching for any memo she might have missed. Huo continued, systematically dismantling each accusation. "You claimed she disappeared during working hours. Did you mention those disappearances corresponded precisely with the emergency meetings I requested about the Li portfolio's cash flow projections after your department mishandled it?" He didn't wait for Joe's response, or that her unprofessional conduct with clients consisted of catching critical errors in the Thomson presentation's financial forecasts that you hadn't bothered to review. With each revelation, the picture became clearer. Kuo wasn't simply defending an employee. He was revealing a pattern of collaboration with Shen that existed completely outside the official company structure. A senior assistant whispered to her neighbor, "They must be—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Everyone was thinking it. Kuo turned to address the gathered employees, his arm now slightly behind Shen, positioned protectively. "Let me be clear. Shen Nanchu has been instrumental in identifying systemic issues within our operational structure for the past 6 months. Issues that some have deliberately hidden from me." His eyes flicked meaningfully toward Gio. Her insights have prevented multiple crises and saved this company millions. That alone should have earned her respect. The office remained silent, hanging on his every word. The revelation of Shen's true role was startling enough, but there was something in Huo's tone that suggested even more remained unsaid. "But there's something else you should understand," he continued, his voice softening. "Miss Shen is essential to me." Finally closed the small distance between himself and Shen, his hand coming to rest at the small of her back. In a gesture that could not be mistaken for merely professional, Shen agreed to work here without title or recognition at my request, to help me understand the true culture of this company. What she has endured today. His eyes swept the room, indicting not just Joe, but every person who had witnessed her humiliation without intervention. Tells me everything I need to know about how far we have to go. The truth continued to unfold. Shen Yanchu was not merely connected to the CEO. She was his confidante, his eyes and ears, possibly much more. The woman they had watched kneeling on the floor had been assessing them all along. Joe's face had drained of all color, his body visibly trembling. He had not simply humiliated a subordinate, he had forced the CEO's most trusted person to her knees. With his authority shattered like glass beneath Kuo's revelations, Manager Joe reached for his final weapon: desperation. The trembling manager who had so confidently controlled the office minutes before now struggled to form coherent sentences, his voice wavering between ingratiating flattery and stammered excuses. "Mr. Huo, I had no idea Ms. Shen was working directly with you. Had I known of your special arrangement, I would never have." Zhao's face contorted in an attempt at contrition, his eyes darting between Huo and Shen. "Miss Shen, please understand I was only trying to maintain departmental standards. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. I'm sure we can reach an understanding." Huo observed Joe's performance with clinical detachment, his expression betraying nothing, as the manager continued his desperate pivot. The floor that had witnessed Shen's humiliation now became the stage for Joe's unraveling. Several employees exchanged knowing glances, a silent current of recognition passing through the room. "Understanding," An repeated, the words hanging in the air like ice crystals. "Let's discuss what I understand." Manager Joe. He turned to his assistant, who had materialized beside him, accepting a sleek tablet. With each swipe of his finger across the screen, another brick in Joe's tower of authority crumbled. "I understand you've denied employees their rightful bereavement leave." The first accusation landed softly, but precisely. Gio's mouth opened and closed without sound, his complexion paling as Hyo continued scrolling through the tablet. "I understand you've claimed credit for others' work while denying them promised promotions." This second blow struck harder, causing visible tremors in Joe's hands. "And I understand you've deliberately scheduled mandatory meetings to conflict with parents' childcare responsibilities, despite our flexible working policy." The final statement delivered with quiet intensity that resonated through the room. The atmosphere transformed. What began as shocked silence evolved into subtle movements. Heads nodding in confirmation, eyes meeting across desks, fingers typing discreet messages. The invisible barriers that had kept employees silent were disintegrating in real time. In the corner, Lin Wei, a junior associate who had been with the company for barely 6 months, raised her hand tentatively. When Huo acknowledged her with a nod, she spoke, her voice gathering strength with each word. Manager Gio instructed me to alter client satisfaction metrics before board presentations, she said, the confession visibly lightening a burden she'd carried since her first weeks. When I questioned the ethics, he reminded me my probationary period hadn't ended yet. Her testimony broke the dam. From across the floor, voices emerged, hesitant at first, then growing in confidence as safety in numbers took effect. He deliberately excluded me from client meetings after I corrected an error in his presentation. My medical leave documentation mysteriously disappeared from HR files. When project succeeded, it was his achievement. When it struggled, it was my failure. With each new account, Izuo seemed to physically shrink, his imposing presence diminishing as the collective truth expanded to fill the space. Like a tower built on sand, his authority collapsed completely, leaving only rubble where once stood a fortress of intimidation. This isn't fair, Zhou protested, desperation giving way to indignation. These are disgruntled employees making unfounded accusations. You can't possibly. Each incident has been documented, Huo interrupted, his calm voice a stark contrast to Zhou's increasing agitation. Dates, witnesses, supporting evidence. Your management style hasn't gone unnoticed, merely unaddressed, until today. Zhou's eyes widened as comprehension dawned. You've been investigating me? For how long? Since the first complaint reached my office 3 months ago, Kuo answered. Though, it seems I should have acted sooner. The revelation hit Zhou like a physical blow. All this time, while he'd believed himself to be consolidating power, he'd actually been under surveillance. The employees you've mistreated deserve more than apologies, Hua continued, turning to face Shen Nanqiu. As someone who has experienced Manager Zhou's leadership firsthand, what would you recommend as an appropriate response? The room fell silent again, attention shifting to the woman who had been forced to her knees less than an hour ago. Here was power being handed to her, the authority to determine her former tormentor's fate. Shen studied Zhou thoughtfully, her composure unbroken, despite being the center of attention once again. When she finally spoke, her voice carried neither vindictiveness nor triumph, but something more profound. I believe in accountability, not retribution, she said, her gaze steady as she addressed Hugh rather than Zhou. Manager Gio's actions have harmed individuals and undermined the company's stated values. I would recommend a thorough review of all decisions he's made regarding employee evaluations, promotions, and project attributions, with appropriate corrections made where injustice occurred. She paused before continuing. Additionally, the company might benefit from implementing stronger protections for employees who report misconduct, as well as more transparent performance evaluation systems. And for Menegio himself, Huo prompted, depends on whether he's capable of recognizing the harm he's caused and working to address it. Some people can learn from their mistakes, given proper guidance and incentive. Zhou stared at Shen in disbelief. The woman he had humiliated was now discussing his potential redemption rather than his destruction. A thoughtful response, Xiao acknowledged. Turning back to the gathering, he continued. Effective immediately, Manager Gio will be suspended pending a comprehensive investigation. Jin Wei will serve as interim department head until a permanent replacement is selected. Furthermore, Ho continued, I'm establishing a committee to review our workplace culture and recommend reforms. Shen Nanqiu will head this initiative, working directly with representatives from each department. As Hua outlined the next steps, the office landscape visibly shifted. Employees who had remained silent for fear of retaliation now stood taller. Security arrived to escort Joe from the building, his access badge and company devices collected as he was led toward the elevator. His final glance back at the department he had ruled through fear revealed not the cowed subordinates he expected, but individuals reclaiming their professional dignity. Some already gathering around Shen, offering information or support for the changes to come. While the crowd dispersed, Fuao's hand rested on the small of Shen's back, guiding her toward his private office, with a familiarity that seemed oddly intimate for what everyone believed was their first meaningful interaction. Few noticed this fleeting gesture, but those who did couldn't possibly guess that what appeared to be their professional introduction was actually the continuation of a story years in the making. The mahogany door closed with a soft click, sealing them away from the curious stares and whispered speculations. For a moment, they stood in silence, the tension of the public confrontation still lingering in their bodies. Then, like actors shedding their costumes after a performance, their carefully maintained professional masks dissolved. Shen's shoulders relaxed, and Huo's stern expression softened into something tender and concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice now gentle, stripped of the commanding tone that had silenced an entire department minutes ago. He reached for her hands, examining them as though checking for invisible wounds from her time on the floor. "I'm fine," she assured him, her own voice transformed, warmer, more confident than the careful, measured tones she used around colleagues. "Though I think our timeline just accelerated considerably." Huo moved to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled below them, a view that symbolized the power and wealth that separated him from Shen in the eyes of society. "I've been thinking about that for weeks now. This arrangement, it's not fair to you." "It was necessary," Shen said, settling into a chair as an equal, comfortable, in a space that clearly welcomed her presence. "We agreed." Their history was formed not in boardrooms, but in a moment of unexpected connection 3 years earlier, when Huo had lost everything, disgraced by a business partner's fraud, his assets frozen, his reputation shattered. It was during this vulnerability that he had encountered Shen. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Hua asked, turning from the window. "When you found me staring at that bridge?" Shen smiled softly. "I said the view would still be there tomorrow, and that sometimes the darkest night gives way to the most beautiful sunrise. A poetic way of telling a stranger not to jump," he said with a quiet laugh. "I was at my lowest point, and there you were, working 3 jobs, barely making ends meet, with your own legal troubles brewing. Yet you stopped for me." The absurdity of their meeting. A CEO stripped of his title, contemplating the end, while a woman fighting her own battles offered him hope, had created a bond that transcended conventional relationships. They supported each other through impossible circumstances. Huo fighting to clear his name, while Shen faced imprisonment for a crime committed by her former employer. "And they took you away," Cho said, his voice growing tight. "I'd just regained control of my company. I had resources again, influence, and I couldn't stop them from locking you up for something you didn't do." "But you never stopped believing me," Shen replied. "You visited every week for 8 months. You hired lawyers when I had nothing. You were the only one who didn't look at my prison record and see a criminal." Their relationship developed across an unbridgeable social divide. The affluent business titan and the woman society had discarded. Expectations and prejudices complicated every step. Xiao's associates viewed Shen as an opportunist. Shen's friends worried she was being exploited. "The secrecy was never about shame," Kuo said, moving closer to her. "You know that." "I know," she nodded. "It was protection. If people knew I was important to you, they would either try to use you to get to me, or worse, target you directly," he finished. "After what happened with Zhou today, I'm even more convinced the threat was real. But keeping our relationship hidden has created its own problems." Shen touched the simple platinum ring that hung on a chain beneath her clothing, matching the one Hua wore similarly concealed. Their marriage conducted quietly 18 months ago, with only a trusted judge and 2 witnesses present, remained one of the best-kept secrets in a city that thrived on corporate gossip. "Do you regret it?" she asked, a rare vulnerability crossing her features. "Marrying someone with my background, the press will have a field day when they discover the mighty Hyo Xian married a woman who served time." Hyo knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I regret only the moments we've lost pretending to be strangers. I regret watching you walk into this building every day as just another employee, when you're the reason I found the strength to rebuild everything." The contrast between their public and private personas was striking. In the office, they maintained a formal distance, Shen the quiet analyst, Hua the intimidating CEO. But behind closed doors, they shared a deep intimacy, built on mutual respect, and a connection forged through shared hardship. "I've been thinking," Chuo said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "It's time we stop hiding. Our marriage and your true position in the company deserve recognition." "Are you sure?" Shen asked. "Once we do this, there's no going back. The board members, the shareholders, they might not understand why you married someone with my history. Let them question it," Chuo replied with quiet conviction. "I faced down false accusations and rebuilt this company from the ashes. I can certainly handle a few judgmental whispers about who I chose to spend my life with." Shen's eyes reflected both hope and apprehension. "And what about the people who will claim I manipulated you, or that I'm using you to advance my career? They'll be silenced by your competence, just as Joe was today." Joe stood, drawing her up with him. "I want to create a proper position for you. Chief Organizational Strategist. The work you've been doing these past 6 months deserves recognition." "There will be resistance," Shen warned. "Not everyone will accept this change easily." "Good," Iwo replied. "Change that comes without resistance rarely lasts. We're transforming this company's culture." As they stood together in the private sanctuary of his office, the weight of their decision settled around them. Their relationship, built on mutual support during their darkest moments, rather than shared privilege, was about to become public knowledge. "Tomorrow, then," Shen said with newfound determination. "We'll start tomorrow." "Tomorrow arrives faster than expected," Shen whispered to herself as she stood outside the department's glass doors, watching employees file in with their morning coffees and uncertain glances. Overnight, the news of her appointment as the new CEO had spread through the company like electricity through water. The very people who had witnessed her on her knees yesterday would be looking to her for direction today, a transition that would test her professional abilities and capacity for forgiveness. As Shen pushed open the door and stepped into what was now her department, conversations stuttered to a halt. Eyes darted between computer screens and her face. She noticed Zhengmin, who had smirked visibly during her humiliation, quickly minimizing her screen and straightening her posture. "Good morning," Shen said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Not loud, not commanding, simply present. "There's a department meeting in 30 minutes. Conference room B." With that, she continued to what had been Manager Gio's office, now stripped of his personal effects. Someone had already placed a nameplate on the door. "Shen Nanqiu, Chief Executive Officer." She ran her finger across the engraved letters, feeling the weight of the transformation they represented. Inside, she took a moment to absorb the space, the expansive desk, the wall of windows overlooking the city, the empty shelves awaiting her imprint. This was the beginning of the real challenge. When Shen entered the conference room 30 minutes later, the employees were already seated, tension visible in their rigid postures and averted gazes. Some fidgeted with pens, others typed furiously on laptops, creating a buffer between themselves and the upcoming confrontation. "I imagine this is uncomfortable for many of you," she began, choosing directness over pretense. "Yesterday's circumstances were different. Today, I'm leading this department. That's a significant shift for everyone in this room, myself included." Her frankness caught them off guard. The expected speech about new beginnings or threats of retribution didn't materialize. Instead, Shen laid out her immediate priorities: a comprehensive review of current projects, one-on-one meetings with each team member, and an open-door policy for concerns. "I'm not interested in dwelling on yesterday," she said, her eyes sweeping across faces that ranged from skeptical to cautiously hopeful. "But I won't pretend it didn't happen either. What matters now is the work we do together, moving forward." The resistance materialized almost immediately. Li Wei, a senior project manager who had been particularly vocal in supporting manager Zhou, raised his hand with barely concealed disdain. "In all due respect," he said, emphasizing the formality in a way that suggested its absence, "some of us have concerns about the sudden nature of this transition. The learning curve for someone without your level of experience is steep." Shen finished for him, nodding. "You're right, Li Wei, which is why I'll be relying on the expertise of everyone in this room, including yours." She held his gaze until he was the one who looked away first. "I don't expect blind loyalty. I expect professionalism, honest communication, and your best work." In the days that followed, Shen implemented a leadership approach that puzzled her detractors. There were no firings, no public humiliations. Instead, she led through methodical competence, arriving first, leaving last, absorbing information at a pace that left even seasoned team members impressed. When she gave feedback, it was specific and actionable, focused on the work rather than the person. The real test arrived 3 weeks into her leadership, when a critical systems upgrade project, one that manager Zhou had repeatedly delayed and mismanaged, reached crisis point. The company faced potential catastrophic data loss and significant financial consequences. Shen called an emergency meeting, laying out the situation without sugarcoating or blame. "We have 48 hours before this impacts client accessibility," she stated, her calm demeanor a counterpoint to the gravity of the situation. "I need solutions, not explanations of why we're here." The room fell silent. She let the weight of the moment sink in. Then suddenly, a flurry of activity. Developers huddled over diagrams. Project managers made rapid-fire calls. "The primary database will collapse if we patch the external API first," shouted a developer from across the room. "But clients can't," began another. "What if we implemented a temporary bridge?" Shen suggested, sketching a quick diagram on the whiteboard. Chen Tio, a senior developer, who had been among her most vocal critics, looked up in surprise. "That could actually work. But how did you know about our architecture?" "I studied these systems before I took this position," she replied simply. "Understanding what you do was my responsibility." The team worked through the night, with Shen alongside them, not directing from afar, but engaged in the trenches. When an argument broke out between teams about approach, she mediated with technical knowledge that surprised everyone. By dawn, they had averted disaster. "We actually did it," breathed June, a junior analyst who had been afraid to speak in meetings under Zhou's leadership. "I thought we were finished." "We did it together," Shen corrected gently. Something shifted in the team dynamics after that night. The whispers changed in substance. Questions about her competence gave way to curiosity about her background. By the end of the second month, projects that had stagnated began moving forward. Client satisfaction scores showed genuine improvement, as Shen insisted on transparent reporting. Even Li Wei found himself impressed after Shen identified a critical flaw in a client proposal, saving him from embarrassment with a major account. "You could have let me fail publicly," he said, when she called him into her office to discuss the corrections privately. "That would have been fair, considering that's not how I lead," she replied. "Your failure doesn't strengthen my position. It weakens the entire department." Perhaps most remarkable was Shen's approach to the toxic culture. She modeled the behavior she expected, creating space for diverse voices in meetings. "I think we should consider a different approach," Jiang Min offered tentatively during a planning session. glancing nervously at Shen. Instead of dismissal, Shen leaned forward. "Tell us more." The department began to transform, not through fear, but through the steady pressure of better standards. People who had once competed to be seen as loyal to manager Yuan now competed to meet Shen's expectations of excellence and collaboration. The grand auditorium of Liang Enterprise buzzed with anticipation as hundreds of employees filed in, their whispers creating a wave of speculation that rippled through the room. Unlike departmental gatherings, this Compudality assembly carried an air of formality that had everyone straightening their posture and checking their appearances. The stage stood illuminated at the front, a podium centered beneath the company's emblem projected on an enormous screen. 3 months had passed since Shen Nianchu's transformation from a kneeling employee to a department leader, and now something even more significant was about to unfold. Small victories within her department were one thing. Addressing the entire company as their new CEO was a significant challenge. As Shen waited in the wings, she ran her fingers over the note cards containing her carefully crafted speech. Each word had been selected with precision, to inspire and to rebuild. Her heart raced beneath her tailored blazer, yet her expression remained serene. "Are you ready?" Shen appeared at her side, his voice soft but filled with unmistakable pride. He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, stealing a glance at the sea of faces through the curtain gap. Some had witnessed her lowest moment. Others had participated in spreading rumors about her rise through supposed favoritism. All would now be looking to her for leadership. Qiu nodded toward the stage. "They're waiting to see what kind of leader emerges from everything that's happened." "And what kind is that?" Shen asked, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. "The kind this company has always needed," he answered, without hesitation. The lights dimmed, signaling the ceremony's beginning. Huo squeezed her hand once more, before stepping onto the stage, to thunderous applause. As he began his address, Shen mentally reviewed the journey that had brought her here. From kneeling on that cold floor, to this moment of recognition, Huo's voice carried throughout the auditorium, as he spoke of transformation and the future of Liang Enterprise. He detailed recent successes, attributing many to the fresh perspective and unwavering standards introduced in recent months. Then, with a purposeful pause, he turned toward the wings. "Today, I'm pleased to formally introduce the person who will lead Liang Enterprise into its next chapter, someone whose insight has already saved this company millions, and whose vision will ensure we thrive for generations." Chen took a deep breath and stepped into the light. The applause greeting her was polite but cautious, unlike the enthusiasm Hua had received. She scanned the audience, noting varying expressions. Executives sat with plastic smiles and calculating eyes. Middle management displayed reactions ranging from support to skepticism. Rank-and-file employees watched with curiosity and apprehension. "Thank you for that introduction," Shen began, her voice steady despite hundreds of gazes upon her. "And thank you all for being here today as we chart the course for Liang Enterprises' future." She deliberately avoided mentioning her past humiliation, focusing instead on what lay ahead. A company culture built on merit, transparency, and mutual respect. As she spoke, a subtle shift spread through the room. Shoulders relaxed, expressions softened. The audience began to lean forward. "Many of you know me from my work in restructuring the systems division," she continued, acknowledging recent accomplishments without dwelling on her entry into the company. "What you may not know is my vision for where we can go, together." For the next 15 minutes, Shen outlined concrete plans for improvements, development programs, and client strategies. She balanced professional analysis with personal warmth, technical expertise with accessible language. With each point she made, the initial resistance dissolved further. Executives exchanged thoughtful glances, while staff members nodded with increasing vigor. From his seat, Qiu watched with admiration as Shen commanded attention. The woman speaking with such authority was the same one who had once been forced to her knees. Yet, she referenced that experience only obliquely, using it as a foundation for discussing workplace dignity. The culture isn't defined by what's written in its mission statement, Shen said, her voice now resonating confidently throughout the room. It's defined by how we treat each other when no one important is watching, or when we think no one important is watching. A ripple of uncomfortable recognition moved through the audience. Several shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact. I've experienced firsthand what happens when that culture falters, she continued, tone measured but unflinching. And I've also seen the remarkable transformation when respect becomes our foundation. Today, I'm announcing company-wide policies that will ensure every person at Liang Enterprise can contribute their best work in an environment free from intimidation and full of opportunity. As she outlined new reporting structures and revised evaluation metrics, the atmosphere transformed from cautious attention to engaged participation. People began nodding. Some took notes. Colleagues exchanged looks of approval. When Shen finished speaking, a brief silence fell, the pause between impact and reaction. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium, a single person began to applaud. Others joined, the sound building until the entire room stood. The ovation continued for nearly a minute, carrying acknowledgement of her journey and acceptance of her leadership. As Shen took in this moment of vindication, she caught Huo's eye. His expression contained everything words couldn't convey: pride, love, and the satisfaction of watching someone who had been underestimated prove her true value. The ovation eventually subsided, but its impact lingered. As Shen thanked the audience, she knew something fundamental had shifted. This recognition wasn't about her new title. It was about establishing a new standard for leadership at Liang Enterprise. In the weeks that followed, the effects extended beyond the company's walls. Industry publications featured profiles of Shen's approach. Clients praised the improved transparency. Competitors began examining their own corporate cultures, wondering if they might be similarly transformed. While industry analysts credited Liang Enterprise's remarkable turnaround to strategic restructuring and innovative policies, the employees knew a different truth. They had witnessed something far more powerful than corporate strategy. They had seen what happens when a leader who once knelt in humiliation rises not to seek revenge, but to ensure no one would ever kneel again. 6 months had passed since Shen Yanchu assumed her role as CEO, and the transformation was palpable in ways that transcended policy changes. The stark fluorescent lighting that once cast harsh shadows across worried faces now illuminated confident smiles and collaborative gatherings. Where silence once prevailed, punctuated only by nervous whispers, animated discussions now flowed freely across departments. Even the physical space reflected the shift. Glass walls that once created a fishbowl effect for public humiliations now showcased teams working together, whiteboards filled with ideas rather than lists of failures. Ming Zhang, a new financial analyst who had joined just 3 weeks prior, felt the difference immediately. Coming from a competitor where rigid hierarchies prevailed, she had approached her first presentation with trepidation. When she accidentally used outdated market projections in her analysis, her stomach had knotted with dread. Instead, her team lead had quietly pulled her aside after the meeting. "We notice some inconsistencies in your data," he'd said, voice low and respectful. "Let's review the sources together. I think our quarterly report templates might not have been updated in your onboarding materials." The intervention represented a fundamental shift in how mistakes were handled. Later that day, Ming discovered the story that circulated through every department like a founding myth. The tale of their CEO kneeling on the office floor, maintaining dignity even in her deepest humiliation, and how that moment had catalyzed transformation throughout the organization. "That's why we don't do public shame here," her colleague Jian had explained during lunch. 6 months ago, your mistake would have become a spectacle. But after what happened with Shen Nanshu, we all learned that brilliance doesn't require brutality. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes of public humiliation, Liang Enterprise had transformed. Employee engagement scores had risen by 47% since Shen's appointment, while voluntary turnover plummeted from 24% to. These weren't just numbers on a report. They represented real people, like Wei Qian, a project manager who had canceled his interviews with competitors after witnessing how Xian handled his team's missed deadline with support rather than censure. The company's response to crisis became the ultimate test. 4 months into Shen's leadership, Liang Enterprise suffered a catastrophic data breach. Instead of triggering a hunt for scapegoats, Shen assembled cross-functional teams focused solely on resolution. "We need truth now, not blame," she announced during the emergency meeting. "Anyone with information that could help us contain this breach will receive immunity from consequences. Your insights are more valuable than your fear." A junior developer stepped forward with crucial information about system vulnerabilities that ultimately allowed the security team to close the breach before competitors could exploit it. Under previous leadership, that same developer would have hidden his knowledge, terrified of association with failure. The partnership between Shen Nanchu and Huo Xian modeled a new professional relationship that transcended traditional power dynamics. Though their marriage remained private, their mutual respect was visible to all. They disagreed openly in leadership meetings, demonstrating that conflict could be productive. When Hua introduced a controversial expansion plan, Shen questioned it in front of the executive team, a challenge that would have been career suicide under the old regime. "Show me where I'm wrong," Hugh had responded, without defensiveness. "If we can strengthen this plan together, we all benefit." This exchange became emblematic of the new culture, one where questioning authority was contribution. Employees at all levels began emulating this pattern, creating a dynamic where ideas improved through respectful challenge. The transformation wasn't without resistance. Some managers who had thrived under the punitive system departed, uncomfortable with a culture that valued collaboration over control. Others required coaching. Shen established a mentorship program that paired struggling leaders with those who had successfully embraced the new paradigm. "We're not asking you to abandon accountability," she explained during a management training. "We're asking you to separate accountability from humiliation. The first builds strength, the second destroys it." For new employees, Shen's story became part of their orientation, not as corporate propaganda, but as a living example of values. Rather than hide her journey, Shen incorporated it into the company's institutional memory, transforming personal pain into organizational wisdom. This philosophy was tested 9 months after Shen's appointment, when a regulatory change threatened to undermine their core business model. Competitors scrambled with legal maneuvering and defensive positioning. Shen took a different approach, assembling a team that included voices from every level of the organization. "We need the people who talk to our clients daily, who process our transactions, who understand the practical implications of every decision we make," she announced at the first strategy session. The resulting solution was innovative precisely because it incorporated diverse perspectives. While competitors floundered with top-down directives, Liang Enterprise developed an approach that transformed regulatory burden into market advantage. They were the first to comply with new requirements, winning client trust and capturing market share. What industry observers couldn't quantify was the direct connection between this success and the moments Shen had spent on her knees. Only those within the organization understood that their triumph emerged from the soil of that humiliation, not through vengeance, but through its opposite, the creation of an environment where such humiliation was no longer possible. "We succeeded because of how we chose to face our challenges," Shen reflected, after navigating the regulatory crisis. 6 months ago, we began dismantling a culture built on fear. Today, we've proven that respect isn't morally right. It's strategically unbeatable. The final chapter of Shen Nanchu's remarkable journey stands as a testament to the quiet power of maintaining one's dignity, even in moments of profound humiliation. Unlike those who wielded their authority to break her spirit, she demonstrated that true strength lies in integrity rather than dominance. Her story illuminates the dangerous nature of superficial judgment, how quickly we dismiss others, only to discover their true worth too late. Liang Enterprise transformed through the revelation of authentic character, not retribution. My journey began with a discarded resume, Shen reflected, and ended by rebuilding what was broken. Her legacy extends beyond vindication, becoming a compassionate force healing the very company that once rejected her.